Hello all, and good afternoon to you. Alright, so today we have a class. I've been talking about it, so we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. But the class is a class on the history of hypnotism. Now, I don't know how much any of you know about hypnotism, whether you think it's real or not, but I have definitely witnessed it firsthand and know that it is something that is real, and it can really happen. So, like I said, when I was a kid, we went to a place, and this guy would hypnotize like big groups of people. And he would ask for volunteers to come from the stage and go up, or from the audience to go up to the stage and see if you could get hypnotized, and only for those who were brave enough to try. And a couple of my friends went up and they actually got hypnotized. So, and they said they didn't remember much of anything. It was like time had just gone by, and they had no idea all the things they did. The thing is that they didn't actually record back then. Like what happened, they wouldn't record any of the live show. And so it was really interesting. But my friends were like, yeah, like definitely hypnotized. And it is amazing the amount of control that you can give over to someone who is a good hypnotist. All right, so, but the history of hypnotism, like where did it come from? Why did we start hypnotizing people? Like what was the point of it? And, so it's an interesting history. So the earliest references to hypnosis date back to ancient Egypt and Greece. Indeed, hypnos refers to the god pictured and is the Greek word for sleep, although the actual state of hypnosis is very different than that of sleep. Both cultures had religious centers where people came to help with their problems. Hypnosis was used to induce dreams, so that they could actually solve problems through people's dreams, which were then analyzed to get to the root of the trouble. There were many references to trance and hypnosis in early writings. In 2600 BC, the father of Chinese medicine, Wang Tai, wrote about techniques that involved incantations and passes of the hands. The Hindu Vedas, written around 1500 BC, mention hypnotic procedures, and trance-like states occur in many shamanistic, druidic, voodoo, yogic, and religious practices. So hypnotism has been around since, the very beginning of time. And I'm sure it was very interesting to be able to watch people get hypnotized, and that it was something that is possible. Like I said, I went up to the stage and I tried, and I felt kind of like I was going under, but then I didn't, and then they're just like, no, it's not going to work for you. And it's not that it wouldn't work at all, but during that session and the capacity that it was in, it didn't really work for me. But it does really work. I mean, hypnosis is a real thing. It's not one of those look at the swinging thing and you can just easily hypnotize somebody or get a umbrella and twirl it. It takes the person wanting to be hypnotized to actually want it, to be accepting of that, and and that's kind of the way it goes through everything. If they're not willing, if they don't want to, it's not going to work. So it has to be accepted by both parties, that of the person hypnotizing and that of the person being hypnotized. So the hypnotic pioneers. So the modern father of hypnosis was an Austrian physician, Franz Mesmer. That's kind of funny because mesmerized. I wonder if that has something to do with it. From whose name the word mesmerism is derived. Sorry. Obviously, I didn't read this. Though much maligned, which he was just upset, he was upset with the medical world of his day. Mesmer was nevertheless a very smart person. He developed the theory of animal magnetism, the idea that diseases are the result of blockages in the flow of magnetic forces in the body. He believed he could store his animal magnetism in baths of iron fillings and transfer to patients with rods or by mesmeric passes. So, some of which it definitely has, because there are things that block this flow of magnetism through our bodies. And so he's not wrong in that. But, I think it ended up being taken a lot further. One sec. Once, things really kind of started to catch on when it came to hypnotism. So the mesmeric past must surely go down in history as one of the most interesting and undoubtedly the most long-winded, which just means a lot for not a whole lot in return, of putting someone into a trance. Mesmer would stand his subjects quite still while he swept his arms across their bodies, sometimes for hours on end. Oof. See, again, I don't think I put up with that. I suspect that this probably had the effect of boring patients into a trance, but it was certainly quite effective. So it probably got them to that point where they were, just tired enough to where they could actually. Mesmer himself was very much a showman, conveying his manner that something was going to happen to the patient. In itself, this form of indirect suggestion was very powerful. Mesmer was also responsible for the popular image of the hypnotist as a man with magnetic eyes, a cape, and a goatee beard. His success fueled jealousy among many of his colleagues, and this eventually led to his public humiliation. Looking back, it is quite incredible that hypnosis survived in these early years because the medical world was so dead against it. So he really went outside of the norm, which is impressive, because that's what you really want to see when it comes to anything. A lot of times people will stop and be like, no, it's this way or this way or that way or this way. And it's really important for people to really think outside and say, hey, look, there's all these readings and all these other things that really can be helped with this. So luckily, even though the medical world was like, no, this is false science, it survived. So another forward thinker was John Allotson, a professor at London University, who is famous for introducing the stethoscope into England, the thing that they listen to your heart with. He also tried to champion the use of mesmerism, but was forced to resign. He continued to give demonstration of mesmerism in his own home to any interested parties, and this led to a steady increase in the literature on the subject. Well, that's good. So he helped it from actually completely dying out. Sorry, I got an itch in my eye. So the next real pioneer of hypnosis in Britain appeared in the mid-19th century with James Braid. Primarily Scottish eye doctor. You could look at what's in my eye. He developed an interest in mesmerism quite by chance. One day, when he was late for an appointment, I need to go to an appointment, he found his patient in the waiting room staring into an old lamp. His eyes glazed. Fascinated, Braid gave the patient some commands, telling him to close his eyes and go to sleep. The patient complied, and Braid's interest grew. He discovered getting a patient to fixate upon something was one of the most important components of putting them into a trance. Talk about luck. And it working. That's pretty good. So the swinging watch, which many people associate with hypnosis, was popular in the early days as an object of fixation. Following his discovery that it was not necessary to go through all the palaver and mesmeric passes, Braid published a book in which he proposed the phenomenon he called hypnotism. So this is where it's really been coined. Again, hypnos was a sleeping sort of thing way back in the days of the early Greeks and the ancient Egyptians. So, but this is when we first really have it. So this is what Braid really goes on. Instead of mesmerism, it turns into hypnotism. Meanwhile, a British surgeon in India, James Esdale, recognized the enormous benefits of hypnotism for pain relief and performed hundreds of major operations using hypnotism as the only anesthetic. So instead of painkillers or anything, he would just put people under a trance and then they wouldn't feel any pain. He probably could tell them, you're not feeling any pain right now. And then they wouldn't feel any pain. When he returned to England, he tried to convince the medical establishment of his findings, but they laughed at him and declared that pain was character building, although they were biased in favor of the new chemical anesthetics, which they could control and, of course, charge money for. So hypnosis became and remains to this day an alternative form of medicine. Now, the French were also taking an interest in subject of hypnotism, and many breakthroughs were made by such men as Liebold and Charhol and Richet. The work of another Frenchman, Emile Coué, was very interesting. He moved from conventional approaches, which pioneered the use of autosuggestion. His most famous for the phrase, day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. Day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. His technique was one affirmation, and it has been championed in countless modern books. So sometimes that's all you need, is kind of a mantra. So a man of enormous passion, Q believed that he did not heal people himself, but merely facilitated his own self-healing. He understood the importance of the subject's participation in hypnosis. So again, it needs to be two willing parties. Sorry, I lost my place. And was the forerunner of those modern practitioners who claim there is no such thing as hypnosis, only self-hypnosis. Perhaps his most famous idea was that the imagination is always more powerful than the will. An example. If you ask someone to walk across a plank wood on the floor, they can usually do it without wobbling. However, if you tell them to close their eyes and imagine the plank is suspended between two buildings hundreds of feet above the ground, they would start to sway. Again, it's all in the head. Not so much the will pushing yourself. No, I can do this. It's really, can I? In the sense of Q, in a sense, Q also anticipated the placebo effect, treatment of no intrinsic value, the power of which lies in suggestion. Patients were told that they were being given a drug that would cure them. Recent research on placebo is quite startling. In some cases, statistics indicate that placebos can work better than any modern medicine's most popular drugs. It seems that while drugs are not always necessary for recovery from illness, So it seems that while drugs are not always necessary for recovery from illness, belief in recovery is. So if you believe you can recover, it's true. You will. And a placebo is basically just like a sugar pill. It's just a sugar pill that has nothing in it, but they say, okay, and doctors will just say, and do like a control group and say, look, we're going to give you this pill, give half the group a real pill, the other half of a group this sugar pill, which is called a placebo because it's not a real thing at all. And people take it, and some people even take the sugar pill and say, I feel better. Like, I can already feel better. But it's just the idea of letting yourself feel better, that you can recover and that you will, is the most important part. And now we move to Sigmund Freud, who was also interested in hypnosis, initially using it extensively in his work. He eventually abandoned the practice for several reasons, not least that he wasn't very good at it. He favored psychoanalysis, which involves the patient lying on a couch and the analyst doing a lot of listening. He believed that the evolution of the self was a difficult process of working through stages of sexual development, with repressed memories of traumatic incidents the main cause of psychological problems. This is an interesting idea that is yet to be proved, because a lot of times at least Freud focused a lot on sexuality and kind of how we're brought up into a world and the problems with it. I mean, there's good things, there's bad things with it, but he really looked at that. But he didn't go much further because there's all sorts of types of trauma that aren't just sexual in manner. Freud's early rejection of hypnosis delayed the development of hypnotherapy. turning the focus of psychology away from hypnosis and towards psychoanalysis. However, things picked up in the 1930s in America with the publication of Clark Hull's book, Hypnosis and Suggestibility. So, like I said, no matter what, when it seems it's over, it's not over. In more recent times, the recognized leading authority on clinical hypnosis was Meldon H. Erickson, a remarkable man and highly effective psychotherapist. As a teenager, he was stricken with polio and paralyzed, but he remobilized himself. It was while paralyzed that he had an unusual opportunity to observe people, and he noticed that what people said and what they did were often very different. He became fascinated by human psychology and devised countless innovative and creative ways to heal people. He healed through metaphor, surprise, confusion, and humor, as well as hypnosis. A matter of indirect hypnosis, he was able to put a person into a trance without even mentioning the word hypnosis. That's impressive. And that's kind of where it is. You get somebody to focus on something so much that you don't even have to let them know that you're hypnotizing them. But you can. You can do it without it, and without them knowing that this is what you're trying to do. It is becoming more and more accepted that an understanding of hypnosis is essential for the efficient practice of every type of psychotherapy. Erickson's approach and its derivatives are without question the most effective techniques. Over the years, hypnosis has gained ground and respectability with the medical profession. Although hypnosis and medicine are not the same, they are now acknowledged as being related. And it is only a matter of time before hypnosis becomes a mainstream practice, as acceptable to the general public as a visit to the dentist. So that is the history of hypnotism in our world. So, it's fascinating, really. I'm amazed. But it is something that, we need to be able to take seriously. Again, because there are lots of different types of medicines. There's like homeotherapy, lots of different things where it's not just like, oh, here's some drugs, they'll make you feel better. It's more like, how do we really figure out what's really going on inside the person? Because a lot of times that's where the main problem lies, is what's going on inside of us, and these emotions and things that we haven't dealt with that need to be dealt with. So that is our history of hypnosis. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, I will see you all on tomorrow. Sorry, I took a group out today, but we're just trying to help out where we can and how we can. But I wanted to make sure that at least all of you had a class for today. All right. Ciao, everybody.